Spring 1942. Over the skies of occupied Europe, German fighter pilots spotted a new silhouette cutting through the clouds. Longer, more awkward than the dreaded B-17 Flying Fortress, the consolidated B-24 Liberator. In Luftwaffe briefing rooms across France and Belgium, German aces didn't hide their disdain. Another American bomber? This one looks even more fragile than the last. Look at that fuselage, thin as a shoebox. Hauptmann Werner Streib, a veteran with 66 victories, laughed when he saw the first combat reports. The Americans have sent us flying targets. That fuselage will snap in half with a few good hits. Oberleutnant Josef Pips Priller, commander of JG-26, was even more dismissive. It's uglier than the B-17, clumsier, and that Davis wing looks like it was designed by someone who's never seen a fighter before. Our boys are going to feast on these. What they didn't know was that they were looking at the most produced American military aircraft in history, and soon 18,000 of them would darken the skies of Europe. This is the story of how German laughter turned to terror, how industrial might crush tactical brilliance, and how the fragility of one aircraft became irrelevant when multiplied by 18,000. When the first Liberators appeared on combat missions over Europe in the fall of 1942, Luftwaffe pilots weren't impressed. The B-24 had a strange appearance. Its wings were high and narrow, designed for fuel efficiency rather than maneuverability. The fuselage was significantly longer and noticeably thinner than the robust B-17. And there was an obvious problem that the Germans identified immediately. That box-like fuselage, constructed with relatively thin aluminum sheets, looked vulnerable. A single well-placed 20mm cannon hit could compromise the entire structure. The technical specifications seemed to confirm German assumptions. The B-24's fuselage used a semi-monocoque design with thinner skin panels than the B-17. While this made it lighter and more fuel efficient, it also made it more susceptible to battle damage. Major Egon Mayer, who would become one of Germany's most successful anti-bomber specialists, with 102 victories, studied the B-24 carefully during his first encounter in November 1942. His after-action report was clinical and dismissive. The new American heavy bomber presents a larger target than the B-17, but appears more vulnerable to cannon fire. The fuselage construction is lighter, seemingly optimized for range rather than survivability. Recommend concentrated fire on fuselage center section, where structural integrity appears weakest. Assessment: easier target than B-17. The first major combat test came during Operation Tidal Wave, the low-level attack on the Ploiești oil refineries in Romania on August 1st, 1943. This mission would reveal both the B-24's vulnerabilities and hint at something the Germans didn't yet understand about American strategy. 178 B-24 Liberators, flying at treetop level to avoid radar detection, attacked the most heavily defended target in Europe outside of Germany itself. The results were catastrophic. 54 aircraft were lost, a 30% loss rate that would have destroyed any other nation's bomber force. Lieutenant Horia Agarici, a Romanian pilot defending Ploiești, described the carnage. They came in so low, we could see the pilots' faces. Our flak caught them perfectly. I watched B-24s fold in half, their thin fuselages unable to withstand the stress of violent evasive maneuvers combined with battle damage. One took a direct flak hit amidships and simply broke apart. The B-17 is built like a truck. This thing is built like a race car, fast but fragile. The German and Romanian defenders claimed 88 B-24s destroyed, though actual losses were 54. The exaggeration didn't matter. What mattered was the perception. The B-24 was vulnerable, easier to kill than the fortress. In the months following Plousty, this perception seemed to be confirmed. Statistical analysis of bomber losses showed B-24 units suffering slightly higher attrition rates than B-17 units on comparable missions. The difference was small, perhaps 2 to 3%, but it was consistent. Luftwaffe intelligence compiled detailed reports on B-24 vulnerabilities. They noted that the Davis wing, while aerodynamically efficient, was more prone to catastrophic failure when damaged. The tricycle landing gear, innovative but complex, was vulnerable to battle damage. The bomb bay doors, which rolled up into the fuselage rather than opening outward like the B-17s, could jam and trap bombs inside a damaged aircraft. American crews themselves had mixed feelings about the Liberator. Those who flew both types often preferred the B-17 for its perceived toughness. The B-24 got nicknames that reflected its reputation: the Flying Coffin, the Flying Boxcar, the Constipated Lumberer. Technical Sergeant Jim O'Brien, a ball turret gunner who survived 30 missions in B-24s, later recalled, "We knew the 17 could take more punishment. We'd seen fortresses come home with entire tail sections shot away, with wings that looked like Swiss cheese. Our bird was lighter, faster, carried more bombs further. But when she got hit hard, she came apart easier. That's just physics. Less metal, less structure." But something was happening that neither American crews nor German pilots fully understood yet. Something that would render individual aircraft durability almost meaningless. While German pilots were analyzing the B-24's structural weaknesses, something unprecedented was happening 4,000 miles away in Michigan. In early 1941, the United States government approached Henry Ford with an audacious proposal. Could Ford Motor Company mass-produce heavy bombers the same way it mass-produced automobiles? Ford's answer was to build the largest manufacturing facility ever constructed, Willow Run. The plant was 1 mile long. 1 mile. To put that in perspective, workers needed bicycles to travel from one end to the other. The main assembly line could accommodate the entire B-24 production process under one roof. Construction began in April 1941. By September 1942, the first B-24 rolled off the line. But the real miracle was what happened next. Charles Sorensen, Ford's production chief, applied automobile assembly line principles to aircraft manufacturing. He broke down the construction of a B-24 into sub-assemblies that could be built simultaneously. Wings in one section, fuselage in another, tail assembly in a third, all converging on the final assembly line. At first, production was slow. In 1942, Willow Run produced 56 B-24s. The government was disappointed. Critics called it Willow Runaway, suggesting Ford had bitten off more than it could chew. Then something happened that would change warfare forever. Ford refined the process, optimized workflows, trained workers to specialize in specific tasks. By March 1943, production hit 75 aircraft per month. By June, 150. By September, 300. At peak production, in August 1944, Willow Run produced 432 B-24 Liberators. That's one complete four-engine heavy bomber every 63 minutes, around the clock, every day. Let that sink in. Every 63 minutes, a complete aircraft weighing 36,500 pounds empty, containing 360,000 rivets, 1,550,000 individual parts, four massive radial engines, miles of wiring, complex hydraulic systems, sophisticated bomb sights, and defensive armament rolled off the line, ready for combat. Willow Run employed 42,000 workers at its peak. More than 40% were women, many of whom had never seen an airplane before Pearl Harbor. They became riveters, welders, mechanics, inspectors. Rose Will Monroe, who worked at Willow Run installing rivets, became the inspiration for Rosie the Riveter. She installed approximately 3,000 rivets per day in B-24 fuselages. There were hundreds like her. But Willow Run wasn't alone. Consolidated Aircraft's San Diego plant produced B-24s at a rate of one every 100 minutes. The Fort Worth plant in Texas operated 24 hours a day with 3 shifts. The Tulsa, Oklahoma facility employed 30,000 workers. Douglas Aircraft in Tulsa developed an innovation that terrified German intelligence when they learned of it: nose section subassemblies. Complete nose sections, with plexiglass, guns, oxygen systems, and wiring already installed, were built separately and married to fuselages in minutes rather than hours. The mathematics of this production were staggering. Each B-24 required 4 Pratt & Whitney R-1830 twin Wasp engines. Each engine contained 1,800 individual components machined to tolerances of thousandths of an inch. American factories were producing 4,000 of these engines per month by mid-1943. Each bomber needed 13 Browning M 2.50 caliber machine guns. That meant American industry needed to produce more than 50,000 heavy machine guns just for B-24s, not counting all other aircraft types. The ammunition requirements were even more staggering. Each B-24 carried 27,000 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition on a typical mission. With hundreds of bombers flying daily, ammunition consumption exceeded 15 million rounds per month by 1944. The aluminum alone required for B-24 production represented a significant percentage of American aluminum output. Each aircraft required approximately 18,000 pounds of aluminum. At peak production rates, that meant 7.7 million pounds of aluminum monthly went into Liberators alone. When Hauptmann Heinz Knoke, a Luftwaffe ace with 33 victories, saw captured American production figures in late 1943, his reaction was recorded in his personal diary. Today, I was shown intelligence estimates of American bomber production. The numbers are so absurd, I initially thought they were propaganda meant to demoralize us. 18,000 heavy bombers of one type? Impossible. No nation has the industrial capacity for such madness. But our intelligence officers insist the numbers are accurate, perhaps even conservative. If true, we are not fighting an air force. We are fighting an industrial colossus that can bury us under an avalanche of aluminum. The German High Command initially dismissed the production figures as Allied propaganda. But by early 1944, they couldn't deny the evidence appearing in their skies daily. January 1943. The 8th Air Force operated approximately 200 B-24s in England. July 1943, 400 B-24s. January 1944, 600 B-24s. July 1944, 1,200 B-24s. January 1945. Nearly 2,000 B-24s in the European theater alone. And this didn't count the hundreds operating in the Mediterranean theater or the thousands in the Pacific. General Major Adolf Galland, general of fighters for the Luftwaffe, began to understand the terrible mathematics his pilots faced. He attempted to explain it to Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring in a meeting in February 1944. Herr Reichsmarschall, we are facing a mathematical impossibility. Our pilots shoot down American bombers at rates that should be decisive. Last month, we claimed 300 heavy bomber kills, a devastating number that should have crippled their bomber force. But their numbers didn't decrease. They increased. For every bomber we destroy, 2 more appear. This is not a battle we can win through tactical superiority. Göring's response was to accuse Galland of defeatism, but the numbers didn't lie. The brutal reality was this: the Luftwaffe could destroy B-24s faster than any other aircraft in history. But America could produce them even faster. A typical B-24 combat loss scenario looked like this. Mission to Schweinfurt, October 14th, 1943. 29 B-24s lost in a single day. For any other nation, losing 29 4-engine bombers in one mission would be catastrophic, possibly war-ending. For the Americans, 3 weeks later, not only were those 29 aircraft replaced, but 75 additional B-24s had arrived in England from the United States. The cost comparison was equally telling. A B-24 cost approximately $297,627 to produce in 1944 dollars. A Focke-Wulf 190, Germany's premier fighter, cost approximately $100,000. On the surface, this seemed like a good exchange rate for Germany. Destroy one bomber worth $300,000, lose one fighter worth $100,000. Germany wins the economic war, right? Wrong, because that calculation ignored the most critical factor: pilot training. An American B-24 crew consisted of 10 men. Each had received approximately 400 hours of training. If the crew was shot down and captured or killed, they could be replaced within weeks by fresh graduates from American training schools that were churning out 30,000 pilots annually. A German fighter pilot in 1944 entered combat with approximately 100 hours of training, down from 250-plus hours in 1942. When that pilot was killed, he couldn't be replaced. German training infrastructure had been decimated by fuel shortages and Allied bombing. Oberst Johannes Steinhoff, commander of JG-77, tried desperately to make the high command understand. We can shoot down 10 bombers and lose 3 fighters. On paper, this looks favorable. But they return tomorrow with 20 bombers and fresh crews. We lost 3 irreplaceable veterans who represented thousands of hours of combat experience. In 6 months, we will have no experienced pilots. They will have 2,000 bombers. And that's exactly what happened. But the mathematics went even deeper into the realm of what modern analysts would call systems thinking. Every B-24 shot down required German resources. Fighter pilots risking their lives in attack runs cannon ammunition, increasingly scarce by 1944. Fuel for fighters, critically short by late 1944. Replacement fighters to replace losses. Replacement pilots to replace casualties. Meanwhile, every B-24 that reached its target dropped approximately 8,000 pounds of bombs on German industrial capacity, further reducing Germany's ability to produce fighters, train pilots, and refine fuel. It was a death spiral, mathematically inevitable. The turning point in German perception came during Big Week in February 1944, when the 8th Air Force launched its most intensive bombing campaign yet against German aircraft production facilities. February 20th to 25th, 1944. 6 consecutive days of massive bomber raids. Over 3,000 bomber sorties. The Luftwaffe threw everything it had into stopping them. German fighters shot down 226 American heavy bombers during Big Week. 97 of them were B-24s. In any conventional calculation, this represented a German victory. A 7.5% loss rate was unsustainable for the Americans, except it was sustainable. Within 2 weeks, every single B-24 lost during Big Week had been replaced. The steady drumbeat of production from Willow Run and the other plants continued unchanged. But Germany couldn't replace its losses. The Big Week raids had specifically targeted aircraft manufacturing plants. Me-109 production dropped 25%. FW-190 production fell 30%. Worse, Germany lost 355 fighter pilots killed or wounded during Big Week. These men were irreplaceable. Many were instructors pulled from training schools. Their deaths created a cascading effect. Fewer instructors meant poorer training for new pilots, which meant those new pilots died faster, which meant more instructors had to be pulled from schools. Hauptmann Hermann Graf, a Luftwaffe ace with 212 victories, mostly on the Eastern Front, was transferred to the Western Front in March 1944 to help stem the bomber offensive. His first encounter with a mass B-24 formation left him shaken. I have fought Russians, British, Americans on the Eastern Front. I have seen mass formations before, but nothing prepared me for this. The entire sky, horizon to horizon, was filled with bombers. I counted formations until I reached 200 aircraft and gave up. They just kept coming. And for every one we shot down, the formation closed ranks and continued. It wasn't combat. It was industrial annihilation. But German pilots weren't just facing overwhelming numbers. They were facing something even more deadly: the defensive firepower of massed B-24 formations. A single B-24 carried 10.50 caliber Browning M2 heavy machine guns, 2 in the nose turret, 2 in the top turret, 2 in the ball turret, 2 in the tail turret, 1 in each waist position, 10 heavy machine guns, each capable of firing 800 rounds per minute. That's 8,000 rounds per minute per aircraft in theoretical maximum rate of fire. But the real terror came from how B-24s flew, in close defensive formations. A standard B-24 combat box formation consisted of 36 bombers arranged in a staggered three-dimensional cube. This formation had been developed through brutal trial and error to maximize overlapping fields of fire. Do the math. 36 bombers, each with 10 guns. That's 360 heavy machine guns pointing in every direction. A German fighter attacking this formation didn't face one bomber. It faced a wall of lead. Oberfeldwebel Heinz Marquardt, an experienced gunner in an ME-110 Zerstörer, described attacking a B-24 formation in December 1943. You see the formation and think, I can slip through between them. Then you commit to the attack run and realize the air between the bombers is solid with bullets. Red tracers coming from every direction. I watched my Staffel leader simply disintegrate. Not shot down. He ceased to exist. The aircraft came apart in midair, shredded by intersecting streams of fire. I broke off and dove away. I was lucky to survive. The .50 caliber Browning M2 was a devastating weapon. Each round weighed approximately 1.7 ounces and left the barrel at 2,900 feet per second. At typical engagement ranges of 500 to 800 yards, these rounds could penetrate the armor of any German fighter. The ammunition itself was sophisticated. American bombers typically loaded a mix of armor-piercing incendiary, API, hardened core that could penetrate armor with an incendiary compound that ignited on penetration, armor-piercing incendiary tracer, APIT. Same as above, but with a tracer element for tracking fireball ammunition. Standard full metal jacket for general purpose. This mix ensured that anything hit would be both penetrated and likely set on fire. But the Americans had developed something even more effective. The combat box formation with predetermined defensive sectors. Each gunner in the formation had a specific sector of sky to cover. The top turret gunners covered high attacks. Ball turret gunners covered low attacks. Waist gunners covered the beam. Tail gunners covered rear approaches. More importantly, these sectors overlapped. An aircraft attacking from 10 o'clock high would be engaged by the nose gunners of the target aircraft, the top turret gunners of the aircraft below and behind, the waist gunners of aircraft on the flanks, potentially tail gunners of aircraft ahead. A German pilot might find himself under fire from 20 to 30 guns simultaneously. Lieutenant Franz Stiegler, a Luftwaffe pilot with 28 victories, who would later become famous for his chivalrous escort of a damaged B-17, described the experience of attacking B-24 formations. The B-17 is dangerous, but the B-24 formations are worse. They fly tighter. Their fields of fire overlap more. And there's something psychological about them. When you see 50 B-24s in formation, you know there are 500 heavy machine guns aimed at you. You can almost feel them tracking you before you even begin your attack run. Many young pilots would break off their attacks before even getting in range. The wall of tracers was too much for their nerves. The statistics bore this out. Analysis of gun camera footage and after-action reports showed that approximately 40% of German fighter attacks on B-24 formations were broken off before achieving firing position. The psychological effect of the defensive wall was as important as the physical bullets. And when German fighters did press home their attacks, the results were often catastrophic for the attackers. Major Egon Mayer, despite his tactical brilliance, was killed on March 2, 1944, during an attack on a B-24 formation. Witnesses reported his Bf-109 being hit by defensive fire from multiple bombers simultaneously. The aircraft exploded in midair. The irony wasn't lost on Luftwaffe pilots. Mayer had pioneered head-on attacks specifically to avoid the concentrated tail guns of bomber formations. But even attacking from the front, he'd face the combined fire of dozens of nose gunners. The Americans refined their defensive tactics continuously. By mid-1944, B-24 formations had evolved into what crews called murder boxes. Formations so tightly coordinated that any gap in the formation was immediately filled, maintaining the defensive wall even as aircraft were shot down. Technical Sergeant Roy Lawson, a top turret gunner with the 392nd Bomb Group, described the coordination. "We trained constantly on formation discipline. Your job wasn't just to defend your own aircraft. Your job was to defend the formation. If the bomber on your right got knocked out of formation, you adjusted to cover his sector. The Germans couldn't exploit gaps because we didn't leave gaps. Even when we were down to 20 aircraft out of an original 36, we flew tight enough that our defensive fire remained effective." The defensive firepower of B-24 formations even affected German fighter tactics. By late 1944, the Luftwaffe had largely abandoned traditional fighter attacks in favor of specialized tactics. Sturmgruppen were formed, heavily armored FW-19s designed to press attacks to point-blank range, accepting heavy casualties to guarantee bomber kills. These units suffered 60 to 70% casualty rates. Rocket-armed fighters attempted to break up formations with R-4M rockets fired from beyond defensive gun range. But the unguided rockets were wildly inaccurate. Jets like the Me-262 used hit-and-run attacks at speeds too fast for defensive gunners to track. But there were never enough jets to matter. None of these tactics could solve the fundamental problem. There were too many B-24s. They flew in formations too strong to attack without prohibitive losses. And every day more arrived from America. March 6, 1944. The first major American bombing raid on Berlin, the capital of the Third Reich. Obergefreiter Klaus Fischer was manning an 88mm flak position on the outskirts of Berlin when he heard it. The sound came first, a distant thunder that didn't stop, didn't fade. It grew louder, louder. Then I saw them. The entire eastern horizon, from north to south as far as I could see, was black with aircraft. Not squadrons, not groups. A wall of bombers that stretched to infinity. 814 heavy bombers attacked Berlin that day. 504 B-17S and 310 B-24s. The largest bombing formation assembled up to that point in the war. The psychological impact on Germans who witnessed it was profound. This wasn't just a military raid. It was a demonstration of American power so overwhelming that it bordered on the surreal. The shadow of the formations darkened the city. The condensation trails from thousands of aircraft created artificial clouds. The sound of 3,000-plus engines in synchronization made buildings shake and windows shatter from vibration alone. Luftwaffe pilots, who scrambled to intercept the formation, reported something approaching existential dread. Lieutenant Heinz Felbel, JG, 26. I took off expecting to see a large formation. What I saw defied comprehension. bombers at every altitude from 18,000 to 28,000 feet. Bombers to the left, to the right, ahead, behind. The sky belonged entirely to the Americans. We were insects trying to stop a hurricane. The defensive firepower of such a massive formation was beyond anything the Luftwaffe had faced. Estimates suggest the March 6th formation had approximately 8,000 heavy machine guns in the air simultaneously. When German fighters attempted to attack, they faced walls of tracer fire visible from the ground. Anti-aircraft batteries reported having to cease fire because German fighters were being destroyed by bomber defensive fire before they could reach attack positions. Hauptmann Wilhelm Crinius, who survived the interception attempt, wrote in his diary, "It was apocalyptic. We weren't fighting aircraft. We were trying to stop a force of nature. How do you fight 1,000 thunderstorms?" Each formation I approached had so many guns that the tracers appeared as solid streams of light. Heinrich was hit before he fired a shot, his aircraft shredded by intersecting fire from 6 different bombers. Karl made it through the first box and was destroyed exiting the other side. I fired at one bomber, saw strikes, and then had to dive away as tracer fire from a dozen aircraft converged on my position. But the Berlin raid, as massive as it was just the beginning. The 8th Air Force had been holding back, building up strength, waiting for the moment when they could demonstrate complete air superiority over Germany itself. That moment came in the spring and summer of 1944. May 24th, 1944. 1,150 heavy bombers attacked Berlin and other targets. The formation stretched for 300 miles in the air. June 21st, 1944. 1,500 heavy bombers struck oil refineries across Germany. B-24s made up 60% of the force. July 7th, 1944. 1,129 heavy bombers, the largest force yet, attacked targets across central Germany. These weren't isolated maximum effort missions. By mid-1944, the 8th Air Force was routinely launching 1,000-plus bomber raids. The 1,000-bomber raid that had been Britain's ultimate effort in 1942, and even then included light and medium bombers to reach 1,000 aircraft, had become America's daily routine. And these were just the 8th Air Force missions from England. The 15th Air Force, operating from Italy with hundreds of B-24s, was conducting simultaneous raids on southern Germany, Austria, and the Balkans. The Luftwaffe was being attacked from 2 directions, forced to split its already inadequate fighter force. General-Lieutenant Adolf Galland attempted to explain the impossibility of the situation in a meeting with Hitler in June 1944. Mein Führer, we face enemy bomber forces that exceed our total aircraft production. On some days, there are more American heavy bombers over Germany than we have fighters of all types in our entire inventory. We cannot intercept them all. Even if we could, we lack the fuel for sustained operations. We lack trained pilots to replace our losses, and we lack the ammunition. The Americans can afford to lose 100 bombers because they will replace them within a week. We cannot afford to lose 20 fighters because we won't replace them at all. Hitler's response was to order the Luftwaffe to focus exclusively on bomber destruction, regardless of losses. This led directly to the formation of Sturmgruppen, suicide squadrons equipped with heavily armored FW-190s that would press attacks to point-blank range. The Sturmgruppe concept was simple: accept 50 to 70% casualties among the attackers, but guarantee bomber kills through sheer determination and heavily armored aircraft that could survive defensive fire long enough to reach point-blank range. It was an admission of desperation. You don't create suicide squadrons when you're winning. The first major Sturmgruppe attack came on July 7, 1944, the same day as the massive 1,000-bomber raid. Sturmgruppe units equipped with armored FW-190s attacked B-24's formations over central Germany. The results were as brutal as predicted. The Sturmgruppen destroyed 28 B-24s. It was the highest single-day loss for the 8th Air Force's B-24 units, but the Sturmgruppen lost 43 fighters and 26 pilots killed, a 60% loss rate. These weren't inexperienced novices. These were carefully selected veterans willing to sacrifice themselves. Within 3 weeks, all 28 B-24s lost on July 7th had been replaced. The 26 dead German pilots? Irreplaceable. By August 1944, the Luftwaffe had essentially conceded air superiority over Western Europe. The standing order was no longer intercept all raids, but rather intercept raids when conditions are favorable and avoid engagement when enemy fighter escort is strong. In practical terms, this meant the Luftwaffe was hiding from the Americans. And still, the B-24s came. Day after day, week after week, month after month. September 11th, 1944. 1,131 heavy bombers attacked oil and industrial targets. September 13th, 1944. 1,242 heavy bombers attacked targets across Germany. September 27th, 1944. 911 heavy bombers attacked industrial targets in Western Germany. October 7th, 1944. 1,420 heavy bombers attacked oil refineries. The numbers became almost routine. 1,000 bombers in a single day was no longer exceptional. It was Tuesday, and each raid included hundreds of B-24s, their distinctive Davis wings, and twin rudders now as familiar to Germans as the sky itself.